I want to get the attention of Mr. Hasan Reza, who's, of course, joining us from Indiana University. There's a trying time. Helen Good was murdered by ICE agents in what the videos became viral internationally. And because of that, people are now showing demonstrations in all the states of America. And, of course, the Pentagon had ordered about 1,500 active soldiers, duty soldiers, to be deployed for Minnesota. This is, of course, according to the Trump administration. I want to ask you this question. We see a rift between the people and the administration in the United States. What is the outcome, and where do you see this issue going?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you. So, yes, this is a tension that is going on, and that tension derives from this idea that how the Trump administration is trying to implement this policy. They're aggressively implementing the immigration policy, and many cases that has been violating some of those constitutional right. Specifically, the U.S. Constitution allows, say, for example, to protest as well as to petition the government, but that has been at stake right at this moment, given the way the government is trying to implement that policy. Now, in regards to that, the way they're trying to justify these potential deployment of troops, Trump administration is trying to use the what we call Insurrection Act. It is a very arcane law that allows U.S. Soldiers to be deployed to quell any unrest or revolution. But it was much more of a rhetoric than the way it's being currently implemented, because the government, even though President Trump has threatened to use it, but in fact, last couple of days, he backed down a little bit about that. So I don't see that it's likelihood that they're going to do it. But at the same time, what they're trying to do, reinforcing the current battalion, in a sense, the way they're sending more ICE agents to that region, and they're becoming much more aggressive in terms of like dealing with the crowd and other protests as well.
I have a small question for Mr. Hasan Reza. This is a very trying time. We know that Donald Trump does not meet eye to eye with other policymakers, and even on worldwide issues. When you look at Greenland, a bipartisan policy-making team from the American politicians have visited Denmark and Greenland to show their support that they are not in line with the commands or with the demands of U.S. President Donald Trump. And of course, there is exciting news that is coming up, where you cannot use military intervention because of the fact that Greenland and Denmark are members of NATO. You use economic weapons that would, of course, affect not only Americans, but also the European states that manufacture products. My question to Mr. Hasan Reza, this is a very strange kind of pattern where, when we used to know, after the World War II, we used to refer to U.S. and the allies as U.S. and Europe. Today, they are the very foe in the battlefield. I want to understand how you felt regarding Greenland and this ongoing situation.
So this is a very interesting question, and maybe requires a little bit of lengthy discussion. So one of the dynamics that you talked about, for example, where our lawmakers are visiting the Greenland and expressing support. So there is two dynamics going on. Say, for example, primarily, the American foreign policy is run by several people, including President Trump, including his right-wing neocons, and some of them do not have deeper understanding of foreign policy, do not have respect for internationalism. In their mind, the America First is their mantra, and that defines everything they try to do. So what's happening in these dynamics? One is President Trump and his dictatorial attitude that defined many of those policy decisions. On the other hand, we see that our congressional committees, senators, and others, even from the both parties, are reluctant to be comply with that sort of policy. That's where the internal dynamics look like. In terms of the NATO relationship, NATO and then like the American relationship, if you look at how consistent President Trump has been, and in his even previous era or the previous time of presidency, he consistently seeing NATO to be an ineffective organization. Part of his grudge coming from is that because he had a real fascination with Russia, specifically the President Putin, and the way he runs. In many cases, he expressed his fascination in many different ways. But the challenge with this particular aspect of it is that he takes that model of leadership and tries to imply or apply it in many different circumstances. For that particular crisis, we see that the conflict between Russia and the NATO has vexed Trump enormously because he doesn't want to see that America is draining money to Ukraine and other stuff, because it goes against his, like the America First, so-called America First policy. When I say so-called, there is a interpretation, but I'm not going to go into that. But now the challenge with America is this, like when in the previous administration, when Trump was there, he asked NATO members to increase their own budget for their defense, which they did not do, or in many cases, they could not meet that requirements. That also vexed it. In America, President Trump has his own interpretation, thinking like why America is going to spend money for the NATO alliance when each of them are very rich, and we do not live in a post-second or post. We are not living in a second world war circumstances or like post-Soviet republic threat. So these combine into this. Why with the Greenland circumstances is a whole different, that's the way we understand it right now, because he wanted, even though all these justification they are putting forth, say for example, it has vast mineral, it has like, it's going to, in future, it's going to, open a passageway once this like Arctic ice get thin. China and other international power are trying to hold a footstep in it. These are not, in fact, very rational reason for him, because he wanted that way. And that has been a policy, and people are trying to, specifically Trump administration, are trying to show certain, certain rationale for why that needs to be. So it is, in terms of the relation between the US and the NATO, the longer relationship, it's going to affect seriously, because already you know that certain Germany, France, and other countries are send their token soldiers, or the army troops are there. But at the same time, NATO is the most profoundly shaken by these threat. So we don't know exactly how they are going to react. Probably they are going to accept it. If America just like forcefully take this territory, it's going to break up the, like NATO and American alliance. But how it's going to play out, we don't know. But one thing I would like to tell you that the Met Federation, she suggested, the Danish Prime Minister, she said like things are not good. It's pretty gloomy there. So because both Greenland and Denmark met vice president and other political establishment, the foreign minister from these two countries, and the meeting didn't go well. That is the complexity right now.
It's a quite important build-up, if you would like to call it. Joint military drills have also taken a place in Greenland, and almost all of Europe, including Germany's militaries, are now stationed in Greenland. The tension are very high. I want to understand what is your overreach? What do you see happening with Greenland? Is this going to be the stage of another plunder like we've seen in Venezuela? What is your analysis?
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, thank you so much. Again, the U.S. is this, in a sense, superpower, and unfortunately, the way we are behaving, not a responsible way, and that is a blatant disregard for international law. Just think about this idea that we are trying to say this country is mine because I want it, because it's for the interest of America's national security. And that interest of national security is, or the Americans' broader interest, doesn't have any major definition. It just it defined by primarily the president at this point. With having said that, if all these countries that are trying to tell us that they are going to deploy troops or other machines to protect Denmark. Denmark is not a big country. Other countries also cannot sustain an American pressure. Forget about any type of military conflict because they are not gonna send their troops to just like defend Greenland. No way, because no country is gonna take that step. But it is a sort of showing the solidarity. But what it's going to do is going to kill the NATO. That's for sure. That has been there. But what is missing in this entire debate, I find it really frustrating, is that we do not ask what the Greenlanders want. Their voice is not being heard. It is a fight between, as if like it's two imperial powers, NATO in one hand, on the other hand, America. They are just trying to divide the world, as if like we are in the 18th century, 17th century. I could just say it, and then like I could just take that. And that idea just completely deny the rights of the people of that particular country. So it's really complicated at this point, the way America is pushing towards that, the way America is just like expressing itself to be an imperial power is not the right expression, and we don't know how it's going to go.